Our guest speaker is Associate Professor Ryan Kelly, who'll be joining us online. Do you happen to be there, Ryan?
I am here, yes. Can you hear me?
That's excellent, excellent. Yes, we can hear you. Professor Ryan Kelly is an expert in human-computer interactions and digital health at RMIT University, specialising in technologies that enhance wellbeing and social connection. And Ryan's research combines human-centred design with emergency technology development to create positive user experiences. He has over 70 academic publications and has received multiple awards for his research from flagship conferences in human-computer interactions. And tonight, Professor Kelly is going to speak to us on the subject beyond minimisation, simplicity in technology design for older users, which is most of us here, isn't it? Over to you, Professor.
Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. I'll start by sharing my screen just to make sure that you can all see it. So can you see my screen?
We can.
Thank you. All right. So yes, thank you everyone. Thank you for inviting me to give this talk today, particularly to Kirsten. I'm Ryan and I'm an associate professor at RMIT University. And fundamentally, what I'm interested in my research is designing positive interactions. So things that people actually want to use and that they need and that make their lives better. I've been thinking about human-computer interaction for about 20 years. I got into this field because I was personally quite frustrated with technologies that I was using, probably back in the 1990s, to be honest. And when I first had that experience of being frustrated, I thought it can't just be me. And so I was really happy when I discovered this field called human-computer interaction, or HCI as we call it. And then within that field, there's this particular topic called usability. And usability is all about making things easy to use. All right, I'll carry on now. So as I was saying, my research focuses on usability. And at RMIT, I do research with people in my group, but I also do teaching. And so I teach students who are primarily software engineers. And a lot of the students that I teach, it's going to be their first time thinking about users and people. So what I thought I'd do today is start off with one of the exercises that I use in my very first class in my course, which is about usability and design, which tries to get students thinking about users. And this exercise is an exercise that I call, where do you think Luna prefers to sleep? So Luna is one of my cats, and I came to own Luna, although probably she owns me. If you've got a cat, you know what I mean. Back in 2023. And so Luna came to me from Pet Barn from an adoption event. And the first thing I thought about when I got Luna is, right, maybe she wants a bed. Maybe she wants somewhere to sleep. What shall I do? What shall I get for her? And so I present this to students in my first class and I say, right, where do you think Luna prefers to sleep? And it's supposed to be a fun exercise. And this is what I show them. I show them these four things. I say, right, do you think that she prefers the cat bed, which is $43? Do you think she would stay in the cat hammock, 39, the cat tree, 99, or somewhere else? And these are all things that I bought for Luna when I first got her. Now, this is the point of the class where the students think, what on earth is this guy talking about? What has this got to do with software design? And why am I here? And if you're probably thinking the same, that's fairly normal. The reason I show them this, though, is because the answer to this question is none of these things. And sometimes the students will guess. They'll say things like, oh, is it the bed? Is it the cardboard box? And the answer is no. The preferred place for Luna to sleep was actually an old paper bag, which cost 5 cents. So the reason I show them this is for I want to think about two things fundamentally, right? The first thing I want the students to think about here is we don't always know what our users need. We come in with some ideas and we think, right, this is probably what people want. This is what I'll design based on my own experience often. But the second thing I want them to think about as well is that often what sometimes people need is something very simple. They don't necessarily need something particularly complex. They don't necessarily need all the features that we can possibly think about. What I really want the students to do is focus on, first of all, what people need, and second of all, trying to understand what people need, trying to understand the actual problems that people have. So I circle back to Luna because if I'd have known more about Luna, I could have saved myself a lot of time and a lot of money as well. Not too much, $150, but it's still a saving. Same goes for software development. The more that we understand our users, the higher the chances that we'll design something that they actually want. A lot of these ideas that I'm going to talk about today are derived from this book by Giles Colborne. This is a book called Simple and Usable. And ironically, it is a very simple and usable book. It's very short and it's very accessible. It's focused on web mobile interaction design. Giles Colborne is a user experience consultant from the United Kingdom. He's actually from Bristol, which is my home city. And this book talks a lot about simplicity as kind of a design virtue. But one of the main things that he says in this book, the thing that I kind of took away from it, is that simplicity is a highly disruptive strategy. So when we've got people often thinking about the most amazing thing you could possibly build, trying to focus on what the most simple thing is can change the market. And there's a really nice example in this book, which I wanted to show you. In order to do it, to set the context, the context for this example comes from 2007. So to go back to 2007, I found this picture, which is the AFL Grand Final, Geelong versus Port Adelaide. If you were there, any Geelong fans in the room, congrats. So back in 2007, going on 20 years ago, one of the most popular devices at the time was a camcorder, handheld camcorder. And these were the sort of things that are being developed gradually. You know, smartphones weren't really around at the time, so people wanted to take video, they wanted to shoot video of things they were doing. And these camcorders were getting more and more complex. There were lots of different features being included, things like cinematic lenses, automatic captioning, zoom, all kinds of functions that the designers of these technologies thought most people wanted. And in the book, Giles Colborne shows a different example, which is the flip video camera. This was a camera that was at the time quite disruptive because it was very simple. This was released in 2007 and it had no zoom. There were no captions, so none of these funky functionalities that people were creating, no video effects. There wasn't even a cable, nothing to connect it to the computer to except for that little USB connector there, which is where the device gets its name because it flips out from the side. And the device only had 9 buttons. There was a play button to play back videos, a trash button to delete them, and the record button in the center there, which people could just point and shoot. This was very simple. It got to the core of what most users wanted to do with this device. In the book, this is a quote from the book, he says, "The flip was crude with a low resolution and missing basic features like optical zoom, but it was also very simple. This device came from nowhere, had no market share, and by the end of the year, it sold 1 million units, which was actually about 20% of the market share at the time. So this was a very successful example of a technology which, again, going back 20 years, was very simple. It took away all the features that most people didn't want or need, and instead just focused on the core thing people wanted to achieve. They wanted to take video easily and quickly. Now, today, that device no longer really exists. You can't buy one. But it's interesting because that goal that people want to achieve, I want to take a video very quickly and easily, has kind of been moved to smartphones, and most people can do that now with a camcorder. So again, this is a case where what was already simple became even simpler because it's included in another device. So simplicity won again. Now, I was thinking about this a lot because this principle relates to my research in many ways. What we try to do in my area of research is we look at social problems often, and we start off thinking that the problem's quite simple. We think we know what's going on. Then we study the situation and we realize, no, actually, this is really complex. There are lots of things going on with this problem. And it's only after that complexity that we get to a point where we can arrive at a simple solution. So I wanted to show you 2 examples from my research and my work that I've done over the years, which are about trying to design for simplicity in design or technologies, especially software and computing technologies aimed at older people. And in particular, older people who don't necessarily have experience with technology. This is what Giles Colborne in his book would refer to as the mainstream users, not necessarily the experts, but the majority of people. And here I'm going to highlight two projects just quickly because I've only got 20 minutes or so. The first one is about social virtual reality, and I'll explain what that is in a second. And the second one is about hospital inpatient pain logging. So to look at the first one here and think about, we were trying to develop this or design this new system for older people in a way that was very simple and that would be accessible to them. This was a project around social virtual reality, and it was essentially saying, how can we design this new technology? It was new at the time, about 5 years ago, so that it's suited to the needs and interests of older adults in particular. So here I use older adults to refer to anybody aged 65 and above. But even within that demographic, there's a very wide range of skills, experiences, and capabilities. So the people in this project were mostly 70 and above. And here, what we were trying to do first of all was to be inclusive in the technology design process, because often older people are excluded from technology design that's aimed at them. But second of all, this project was essentially focused on thinking about social isolation. So what could we do if we were trying to design social virtual reality to help people who might be socially isolated to connect with other people and have a conversation with them? And this was work done at the University of Melbourne in collaboration with Dr. Stephen Baker, who led this project, Professor Jenny Waycott, and Professor Frank Viteri. Now, just to give you a bit of information about what this technology is, social virtual reality is, you've probably heard of it, you may not have used it, but it's this technology where you can put a headset on over your head and you are immersed into a virtual environment. So you can move your head and the virtual environment will move with you. It feels as if you're really there. You're very present in that space. And most virtual reality applications have hand controllers. You move this controller around and you'll see your hands moving in the virtual environment, and you can grasp objects and you can pick up things. And in games, you can shoot and things like that. In a social virtual reality setting, you'll be using this with one or more other people. So you will see them in the virtual environment. You'll be able to talk to them, you can hear them, and you can interact with them in different ways. So we're trying to think about, okay, how can we take this technology, which is fundamentally about social connection, and design it to suit the needs of older people in a way that's accessible and simple? This was a very participatory research project, so I'll give you a really high level sense of what we did. There were 25 older people involved in this project, and there were kind of four phases. The first one was a very initial open-ended exploration to help the participants understand what virtual reality is, because none of them had ever used it before. In the second phase, it was about ideation. What do older people want? What might they value if we were going to make something for them in social virtual reality? Then we actually made a system for them to try, and we did an evaluation, a preliminary trial at the university. I'll show you some of the things that we did. In the very first step, we invited older people into the lab and gave them the chance to experience what virtual reality might be like. So in this setting, there's a group of people, about 3 or 4 people at a time, and they were standing in front of a large screen. And onto the screen, there was a projection, and it was projecting an image of an avatar. And an avatar is like a virtual representation of yourself in virtual reality. So you can see in the top right there that the participants are moving their hands. And what they could do in this application was move their body parts, and the avatar would mirror what they were doing. So this was an initial attempt to get them used to the idea of virtual reality, to help them understand what it involves, and to help them learn how to interact, how they might use it. So as they move their arms, the avatars make gestures and move their arms as well. After this phase, we did an ideation phase. So, okay, now that the participants knew what virtual reality was, we needed them to think about what they could design. In this phase, we did a series of workshops, and here the participants were discussing the content and the functionality that they might want in social VR. And they came up with 3 ideas. First one was to do card games, other games in virtual reality together. Second was to have a virtual travel experience, almost like a kind of tour or a cruise of some kind. But the third one that the participants were most interested in was this idea about reminiscence. So the idea about talking about the past, talking about your younger years in a group of people. And the idea that they liked the best within that particular group was the idea of reminiscence about school. So going back to their school days, talking about what their school was like, what they studied, who they were there with. This was something that they thought they would have in common with other older people, and the vast majority of other older people might enjoy talking about it as well. So with that idea in mind, this was something that the participants wanted to try. We created a virtual environment, a social virtual reality application themed around school, and it was called School Days. And this is what it looked like. So here, what the participants could do, they could put on the virtual reality headset, and they could enter that virtual environment, and they found themselves inside a classroom when they were there. There were actually several environments they could go to, but the main one was this classroom. And you can see in the image on the left, it's very much styled after a classroom. There are desks, there was a globe, there was a map on the wall. I think there were ink wells in the desks as well that, were like what they would have had at school. And then what they were able to do was sit around a table. I'm being joined by my cat, so apologies if you can hear her. They were able to sit around a table and talk to each other about their school experiences. And so in the picture on the right, there's 3 participants along with a facilitator. We did some things in the virtual environment to try to make it easy for the older people to have conversations, because many of these people, first of all, never used social virtual reality before, and they didn't know each other. This was a really crucial thing that we wanted to think about. So there are a few things that we did to try and scaffold this idea of reminiscence. The first one was this idea about conversation starters. So here what participants could do is they could generate a board with a question on it, and this was a board that would guide the conversation. So in this case, it says, what school trips and excursions did you take? Very simple question that can stimulate conversation. The second thing we did was we allowed participants to create what we called personal artifacts. So these were things from their childhood or things from their school years that they could bring into the virtual environment and share with one another. So in this picture, there's one participant sharing a photo of himself with his brother from his kind of school years, and they're both wearing their school uniforms. And in the VR environment, he could actually grasp that object and pass it to another older person, and that person could look at it close up inside the virtual reality environment. Often we get questions about this project, which is why would you use VR instead of a video call? And so these are some of the things that you can do inside virtual reality that you can't do in other mediums. You feel very present there. You can create an environment that seems relevant to the situation, and you can hold and pass these objects around. The third one that we created was something called an avocast. So this is the idea of having another older person record themselves talking about their early experiences, and then they appear in the virtual environment as a kind of hologram. So here, the older person is watching another person who's not there speaking about their early school experiences. After we created the environment, we did an evaluation and we tested the system with a group of older adults. Some were in Melbourne and some were in Bendigo. We had groups of 3 plus a facilitator to guide the discussions. I'll highlight a few of the main findings before I move on to the second case study. One of the things that we found is that by focusing on what the older people wanted and what they felt that this technology would be good for, they became very confident about using this technology and started to use it independently during the trial. In the beginning, the facilitator played a very important and key role in making people feel comfortable. But after that, they were very keen to return to the VR environment and use it for themselves. We also found that those simple co-designed features were very useful for prompting reminiscence. So this thing about sharing objects from your youth, in the top right there, a person's sharing a page from a cookbook. This is something that generated a lot of conversations. And it was really interesting because some of these conversations were quite positive, but some of them were also quite challenging because people were talking about a time when corporal punishment, I think, was allowed in schools. So there are often conversations that were perhaps a bit emotional and challenging to talk about. And for that reason, participants valued the anonymity of virtual avatars for open discussions. They felt that they were able to share their experiences because they didn't really know who was behind the avatar. So this was a project where the key focus here was thinking about what the people would design this technology for. So it was driven very much by, first of all, the technology, but also the user group. In this second case I want to talk about where we had to think about simplicity, this one is about, first of all, the same user group, but a different context and coming from a different need. This is a device called a pain pad, and this is a handheld device for pain logging, which we designed in collaboration with the Open University in the United Kingdom. So the Open University is in Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes is known for lots of trees and lots of roundabouts, but it also has a very good hospital. And so in this project, we were collaborating with a surgeon from the hospital to try to create this device to help people log their pain. So why did we do this, and what is this about simplicity? What's going on here? This project started with the surgeon. It wasn't the user group, it was the surgeon's need. And this surgeon's called Professor Oliver Pierce. And Oliver is a hip and knee surgeon, so arthroplasty as he refers to it. And what he wants is after people have had surgery, he wants them to move around again quickly. Because the more mobile you are after surgery, the higher chance there is of having that mobility last. But one of the problems that patients often face is that moving around is painful. So Professor Pierce wants a way to record their pain levels. He needs to know how much pain they're in so that he can monitor their recovery. Now, the way this is done traditionally, if I can use that word, is that what happens is a nurse goes around the ward and talks to patients and is supposed to collect a pain score every 2 hours. And the way that works is the nurse goes to the patient and says, "How much pain are you in?" And the patient replies verbally with a score of 0 to 10, where 0 is no pain and 10 is the worst pain they've ever been in. So most people in this case respond with a score of 6 or 7, probably 5. If it's an 8, 9, or 10, that means they might need pain relief. That might mean as well that something's not gone well with the surgery, and so it's a time for intervention by the clinicians. Now, the problem with this approach is it's very error prone. Nurses are very busy. They don't have time necessarily to collect this data, which means compliance is low. Professor Pierce wants a reading every 2 hours, but generally doesn't get that because often nurses are busy or patients are off doing something else. They might be having a scan, they could be asleep, they might be in the bathroom. There's all sorts of reasons why the data would be missing. Another issue with this method is that patients often underreport their pain. If you say to someone, "How much pain are you in?" they sometimes don't tell the truth because they don't want to be seen as troublesome to the staff. So the data is not necessarily faithful to their actual pain. And the other problem is that the scores need to be manually entered into a database. So once the nurse has gone around and ticked everybody off, she then has to input that into a database, which takes more time and can create more errors. Most people, when they hear about this scenario, they say, "Why don't you just design a mobile app? Why don't you just have something people can download on their phone?" And this is where the context and the user group come in for this particular problem. Because first of all, when you're in hospital, any device in the hospital needs to be sterilizable because it has to be swapped to new patients. It also can't be too costly to replace if it's broken. So if we've got something like a smartphone or a tablet, if somebody drops that on the floor and it breaks, that could cost hundreds of dollars to repair or replace. And that leads to one of the more interesting design requirements in this project, which is that it has to look cheap to prevent theft. So if people are using lots of phones and tablets, somebody might walk off with one of those. Things tend to go walkies in hospitals, is what Professor Pierce told me. So we need something that looks cheap. But the other reason is because the users matter. Many of the patients that Professor Pierce deals with are elderly. These might be people in their 80s and 90s. Many of them don't own a smartphone. Touch screens don't always respond to their input. And it's very common for them to have impairments or comorbidities. They may have auditory impairment, visual impairment, sometimes dexterity impairment. So they need something tangible. An app doesn't necessarily work well for this group. This is how we came up with the idea of PainPad. There was a bit of a longer design process for this device, but I'll give you the sense of what it does. It's basically a little box that you can hold in your hand. It's about hand-sized. It's got 6 off-the-shelf components. It's got Wi-Fi built in, so it can connect to the hospital Wi-Fi. It's got a wipe clean membrane for sterilization. And I think that pad there is an off-the-shelf kind of dial pad, where the 10 has been added over the star. So it's a bit of a low fidelity prototype, I would say, in this particular case. It's got 2 LEDs which flash to attract attention. It makes a noise as well with an alarm. The cost of that device, excluding the battery, is $5. So if that gets broken, it's very cheap to replace. It doesn't matter if somebody walks off with it. It doesn't matter if it goes missing. These are some iterations of the PainPad. The one on the left is the current version, a much more refined version of the previous prototype. The image on the right shows where it lives in the hospital. So it would sit on the nurse's station in a charger. And then when somebody comes into the ward after surgery, they'll be given one of these and they can keep it next to their bed, much like the person in this picture. So you can see how it's used here. They enter that pain score using their finger. Now, we've done an evaluation of this device as well, and it's been in the hospital for some time. It's been deployed to a recovery ward for hip and knee surgery. In the first trial, which was conducted back in 2017, there were 54 patients, but it's now been in use for at least 6 years, so we've got data on hundreds of people. There are a couple of things we've found with this device. It's very simple, first of all. We've tried to really address that user need and the situation to create something cheap and easy for people to use. What this device has done is led to higher compliance. So we've seen that the pain records are 20% more complete by having this device instead of requiring nurses to do it. We've also seen that the pain scores that it collects tend to be higher than what patients report to nurses. So it implies, it's difficult to make this claim, but it implies that perhaps what people enter into this device might be more truthful because they're not troubling anybody when they enter this data. The other thing that we've seen, which is really important as well, is that usability and ease of use have been quite a positive aspect. So we've had lots of feedback on this. And something that always stands out to me is that people say it's easy to use with one hand. So they can just hold it and enter that value, and they don't need to do anything else with this particular device. All right, I'm coming to time now, so I'm going to wrap up with a few takeaways. These are just some of the projects that we've been thinking about in my group, but they always bring me back to this idea about, okay, we've got a complex problem. We've tried to solve it in a very simple way. What's the value of that? I think that focusing on simplicity creates a positive user experience, particularly for older people who may not be familiar with technology. I think as well, involving users during the design process helps us to keep it simple. People often talk about this, but they don't necessarily talk about why. And I think it helps us to focus on key user needs and keep everything as simple as it needs to be. And the third thing is that simple user interfaces empower people to become active users. Often older people are seen as technology recipients, but in these projects, what we've seen is that they can become empowered and active users through co-design. That brings me to the end. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. Look, thank you very much. That was very interesting and very relevant. And it's disappointing that you're here on an occasion where we had the limited time because of our AGM. But it may be we'll ask you to come back and share some more of your work but that's up to others. But for now, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. And Luna was here all the way through that, so she's very keen to meet you all as well, as you can see. Thank you.
Now, Dave, next item on the agenda is our president's report.
Well, this is the kind of monthly president's report. This is a little bit more fun probably than the other one, but I'll go through this in fairly quickly. Been a few things happening. Friday week last, or whatever it was, on Halloween night, on Halloween day, shall we say, we took part in a show at the Glenara Town Hall called Healthy Aging Expo. And I thought there might be, 2 or 3 disinterested pensioners traipsing through the magnificent town hall they have in Glenara. I arrived at 2 minutes past opening time, and they were almost queuing up down the street. It was absolutely amazing. There we reckon probably about 1,000 people visited the show. And I think in some ways we had the most interesting. It was just a tabletop exhibition, but we had lots of flashing lights and a 3D printer and stuff like that, rather than what I think is boring old progress clubs and those sorts of things. It was quite a good little exhibition, and we had a lot of interested people there. So hopefully, and we got rid of a lot of pamphlets. With a bit of luck, we might get a few people rocking up here and joining the club. So that was really good. Right behind us here, we are converting the library that used to be into a recording studio, which is initially going to be for audio, so people making podcasts, which is all the rage these days, but it's being done in a way that preserves, keeps the option to expand into video as well. One step at a time. We've budgeted $5,000 for that project. We're getting probably about $15,000 worth of value because we're doing it in conjunction with, was it RMIT, Kirsten? Monash. RMIT, yeah. Yeah, so it's a student work experience kind of a deal. And so these young people get to exercise their skills. And we're kind of fortunate that one of the guys is actually a very skilled tradesman. So a lot of the hammering and sawing and type stuff like that, he's right up there with that. So that'll be really good. As I mentioned in the other reports, we're sort of reaching out to local organizations a bit more now. A week or so ago, David Evans, our vice president, and Mick went to, Michael Adams. Sorry, my head's weird today. Went to the Bent Men's Shed, and David gave a bit of a talk about what we're doing there, or we're doing here, and Mick sweet talked the guys, I think is the right way to put it, at the Men's Shed into collaborating with us to build a TARDIS around the equipment rack that's out there. So we've got, we'll have this just a TARDIS. Everyone, yeah, I'm sure everyone here is. Yeah, I'm going to say everyone who's into Doctor Who, which must be everyone here because that's the generation. There'll be a TARDIS there, and it's going to have some sound effects that we'll cobble together and some flashing lights and all sorts of fun stuff like that. And just spritz up the place a little more when people come in. I think it's important that when people come in, they see something interesting and engaging and exciting, and oh, look at that, fantastic. We've got a brand new member, and I think he might be in the room right here, who's refurbishing the game table, so it'll actually be back in a working order because it was, sorry?
Yeah, okay.
Arcade game thingy, yeah. Another little sort of a tractor. So we're trying to do that. We already have the clock that we have in the front hall there and so on to just tart the place up when people walk in. I think it's important that they get oh, this is interesting. Yeah, what else is there? A couple of weeks ago, I'm not sure why, but I was interviewed on Southern FM 88.3 by a lady whose name is, oh, my goodness. Claire Arthur, yes, who's actually quite a notable international journalist. She used to be a foreign correspondent with the BBC. She's now sort of more interested in very ultra, what's she called, mega ultra local or something like that. So we had a 10-minute interview on there, helping to spread the word about our club in the neighbourhood. And just in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed somebody's been bringing in some sewing machines, and so there's an interest in setting up a textile sort of activity, and there was some interest in setting up a jewellery making type of activity as well. The purpose of this is to broaden our scope into the sort of making things sort of era, which is much more what's going on these days, and to be able to attract people to come in here and do their activities and socialize. And that's what that's all about. Well, that's the end of what I have to chat about on that one. So thank you very much. And I hand back to Barry.
We're running a little bit ahead of time. So Harry, we might invite you to join us about 8:20, if that's all right with you, a bit earlier than scheduled.
That's fine.
Thanks, Harry. Just in the 5 minutes before we break, yesterday there was a news item that I thought you might be interested in, and it was a report that the Northern Koreans, acting as a state actor, have found ways to get in to steal crypto in a way that can't be reversed. And Google explained in simple terms, in practical terms, the technique allows threat actors to update or swap malware payloads by rewriting contract storage variables on chain, or without needing re-compromise distribution sites or clients. The Google report ties the blockchain infrastructure to real-world infections delivered through compromised WordPress sites and social engineering lures, including fake job interviews designed to bait crypto developers. Victims who land on these sites receive the Jade Snow loader, which then reaches out to the on-chain smart contracts, retrieves a JavaScript payload and runs it locally. That payload then launches Invisible Ferret, a full-featured backdoor with remote control that enables long-term espionage and data theft. Now, it was very good of Google to sort of explain how it all happened in case anyone wants to try the same trick. But the committee met and discussed this news item and decided that anyone understood any of it is drafted onto iHelp and should contact Harry to find out when you're rostered on. Now we're going to break for coffee. We'll take our seats in the room and welcome back those who are online and have just gone off for a cup of coffee and come back. And Harry's from iHelp, which is one of the most important functions of the club. So over to you, Harry.
Thank you. So I will say a little about iHelp at the end. I was warned that this slot might be long. The last estimate I saw was 15 minutes. So now we've got a bit longer. So I've actually produced a document, which is a concertina. You can expand it or contract it. And I've actually put a link to the whole document in the notes for everybody. So I'm going to share my screen, or share that window actually when I find it. Yes, here we go. Right. So I've got three sections of unequal length. A book recommendation. Some notes on sundry topics in the very busy area of AI, and then a comment about the good old Windows 10 extended security update. So I think what I might do is to run through it quickly and then go through it slowly. So you have an idea what's going to happen. And then there should be ample time for discussion at the end. So the book I'm recommending, which is actually very new, and I haven't finished it yet, is a book by Tim Berners-Lee. And it's called This Is For Everyone. And I'll explain why that is so interesting. So I'll skip over that. Now, my AA Miscellany is a collection of partly of news reports and other odds and ends that I've collected over the last few days in what is a completely messy, beyond description, set of different events and processes that are going on under the umbrella of the misleading title AI. So I'll come back to that. And then finally, so that's the AI section there, a word or two about Windows 10 ESU, which hasn't gone away, fortunately, for some of our members. So first of all, I go back to the book. So Tim Berners-Lee I'd heard of, you might say, of course, actually back when I was working in the UK, because he had some contacts where in my place of work as the inventor of the, the World Wide Web. I had no idea of the other things he'd done and his very strong continuing involvement in all things to do with the internet. So I'm most impressed with what he's done, and the book is beautifully written. I'll almost read this one through to you because this is the Amazon description. Oh, excuse me. The most influential inventor of the modern world. Sir Tim Berners-Lee is a different kind of visionary. Born in the same year as Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, Berners-Lee famously distributed his invention of the World Wide Web for no commercial reward. Its widespread adoption changed everything, transforming humanity into the first digital species. Through the web, we live, work, dream, and connect. In this intimate memoir, Berners-Lee tells the story of his iconic invention, exploring how it launched a new era of creativity and collaboration, while unleashing a commercial race that today imperils democracies and polarizes public debate. Filled with his characteristic optimism, technical insight, and wry humor, this is a book about the power of technology, both to fuel our worst instincts and to profoundly shape our lives for the better. As the rapid development of artificial intelligence heralds a new era of innovation, Berners-Lee is the perfect guide to the crucial decisions ahead and provides a gripping in-the-room account of the rise of the online world. Peppered with rich anecdote and amusing reflections, This Is for Everyone is an essential read for understanding our times and a bold manifesto for advancing humanity's future. I do recommend it. I've actually got the Kindle edition, which is $18. You can't really put it down. I've not quite got to the end yet. And there are some really quite fascinating biographical details. He doesn't dwell on his personal biography, but there's some wonderful jewels in there along the way. So AI, because this is one of the many elephants in humanity's room at the moment, and is no one thing. AI, first off, is actually the very phrase is a piece of publicity invented in 1956 to try and get a grant for a new project. The word is everywhere, but what it labels is a lot of different things and a lot of different processes. So I've collected together, with references in all but one case, a few topics which are distinct from each other, but with some degree of overlap. Something about the fundamentals, which helps to explain, or it doesn't explain in itself, why we are easily fooled. And another book to complement one we talked about before, on the huge amount of underpaid and exploited human labor that is behind the artificial intelligence services that are so heavily spruiked today. And a few recently documented elements in the very complex picture, a bit of research, quite serious research on how good news reporting was through AI sources, a comment on something about how training regimes make bullshit outputs more likely. And something that came up recently, this is in the conversation, about something that's called the doorman fallacy, which is a nice name. Another rather different topic is what they're calling shadow AI, and we'll get back to that. And the risk of personal data leakage. How much is it happening? That's what the next one's about. One of the probably best documented worldwide and sharpest illustrations of the weaknesses of, in this case, large language models, is what they misleadingly call hallucinations. And when they turn up in legal briefs that are citing non-existent cases, this is quite a serious problem. Another dimension, which in its way is huge, I believe, in terms of the numbers of people doing this, is the people who are using, typically, I think, ChatGPT, in other words, generally, as you might call generalist AI chatbots, and confiding in them in different ways, which can have the most disastrous consequences for individuals or the people they don't like. So that's a really serious topic and worth a mention. When I get down to the bottom again, just to say that this is where you can all come in and discuss it if you want to, The main point of bringing this one up again, yet again, if you like, is to be sure anyone who might hear this is aware that the ESU is still there for them and the actual entry cost is very low. And iHelp has already been assisting members in that regard. So I'll go back up now to the AI topics and I'll do the same sort of thing. Trot through it probably as quickly as I can. Then, because I say all but one case, which is on the screen now, there are references for you. And then perhaps take it through again and pause so that you can make comments and ask questions. I keep my eye on the clock. So the dominant AI services or chatbots are large language models, of which ChatGPT is the leading example with supposedly 800 million users. And that's what this focuses on. They're not, the models are not uniquely based on language. For example, there are models that are using very similar processes to process images. But language has a special place here. So the first reference, actually, I wanted to be absolutely clear, excuse me, what the atoms, if you like, of analysis are here. And a couple of documents I've collected there explain what are called tokens. And I thought the tokens might just be random, as it were, arbitrary strings of 4 characters, because that's the average length, apparently. But that's not doing it justice. It's something a little cleverer than that. When you look at the examples, which you can see if you follow through the link, they are what you might think of as syntactically significant parts of words, if they're not whole words. An example given is believable, where that's split into believe, ending in V, and the able suffix. And you might have thought that that level of analysis was based on linguistic theory, because, of course, what you're looking at is the concept of a root word, in this case, belief, which is compounded using quite familiar grammatical rules into a number of other kinds of word, in this case, an adjective. But apparently, that particular subdivision is itself the result of a statistical analysis of a very large database of language. So they didn't ask the linguist, they had it reinvented for them by a process that ended up with a particular collection of these subwords, which are called tokens. Tokens do figure somewhere else in the world of AI, and I'm not at all clear that they're the same thing. When you're really paying big money to one of the AI providers, your actual usage is counted in tokens. And if anyone in the room is able to tell me what they are, I'll be very grateful later on. Now, one of the most significant social effects of what's going on depends on humans believing it through their interactions with these chatbots that the chatbot is some kind of actual person. They may not think it's a human, but it's a person for whom they have emotional attachment in some cases, and so on. Now, if you know how the sausage is made, you know that the thing at the other side has no emotions whatever. And it's not even in any simple sense a thing. It's a collection of loosely interconnecting computer programs. In fact, some of you will probably have read or know that the latest version of ChatGPT is a kind of front end to a number of different previous versions and other tools. And people can be shifted from one to the other in the middle of an interaction. And it's quite forgotten what happened in the earlier stage, caused a lot of grief among users of ChatGPT 5. So it's not even a single computational entity, as it were, at all. But there's a famous example way back in the history of this, in the program ELIZA by an American scientist called Weizenbaum. And he wrote it intending to show people how a machine wasn't like a person, and it had a very simple protocol for interacting with the human, who of course was typing at a terminal, and a pre-Windows terminal, a pre-Mac terminal. And it basically had a very simple grammatical transformation. So you'd say X and they'd say, oh, why do you say X? And so on. And famously, Weizenbaum's own secretary fell in love with this machine and shooed him out of the office when she was interacting with it. And that's come to be called the ELIZA effect. But what that shows something quite general, which I've tried to touch on here without citing new sources at this stage. When we think how terrible it is that people are taken in, and in some cases, which we'll get to, this can lead to quite disastrous consequences, we tend to blame the user for not realizing that you've just got what is a rather complicated computer program on the other side. But I think that's not quite fair to the victim, because I've just labeled these roughly two different facts about human nature. One is humans are forever reading something like humanity, or at least life, into things that have none of it. A very simple example is seeing human faces in clouds. And many cultures, of course, have ascribed agency to forces like lightning or things like trees. It seems to come with the species that we project ourselves onto things that are not ourselves in that respect. When we get to language, I think something obviously similar in a way, but also different, is the way we think about language, or rather the way we respond if we're presented with a paragraph or whatever out of context. We immediately normally understand the words, but we project into the words a speaker or writer, even if the words are like the monkeys writing Shakespeare, which is pretty much what we've got. We've got a lot of much more organized monkeys producing something that looks a bit like Shakespeare. But the actual truth about this, and this is where you need to have a little bit of knowledge of recent research, both psychological and theoretical, into the nature of language. When you read a book, it's actually you creating the meaning. You, the reader, are in effect recreating something. It isn't there in the words until you've done that. A book to have meaning requires the reader. But at that point, how the words got on the page doesn't matter. And in the case of the AI large language models, the source has no understanding at all. What you've got is something that in its way is extremely clever, a statistical engine that produces something looking like what people might say all right. And that's when we get to the hallucinations. We'll get back to that. I had to mention the next book as well. You may remember that when Chris McKeon and I talked about this, we mentioned Empire of AI by Karen Harto, which is a very long book, but it does devote first-person reports on the way in which people, mostly in the global south, are being employed at low wages to do some of the testing. It is testing in this case, not initial input of the outputs of large language models for things like violence and sexual content. There's a group of 3 people here based in Oxford who spent 10 years researching this, and this book was produced just a few months ago, which goes very deeply into this soft underbelly of the AI movement. And I think anyone who is, however happy you are with the product, which is another question, needs to be aware of the huge human cost underlying what you're seeing and using. Now, these are then special cases, really, in that context. This one mentions research, collaborative research over some period in comparing the news reports on certain defined topics from AI sources with reality, and AI did very badly on those. This one I haven't fully digested yet, but this is a more technical approach, how the actual way they're trained. And this is interesting to me because training introduces that human feedback. So what you get in the end of the process, the sausage that comes out of the machine, isn't a reporter. It isn't only the result of the amazingly layered computer processes and probabilistic judgments in the transformer stage and so on. It's also the result of a lot of feedback from these human subjects. So that's the training regime. The Dorman fallacy is a label for a mistake that people employing AI tools to replace humans easily make. And the example of the doorman is that you think of the doorman in the hotel as simply counting people in and out, if you like, whereas in fact they play a lot of different roles intuitively and without anyone documenting them carefully, which the AI will never succeed in replacing. And a lot of this is actually going on where companies are releasing people, as they say, and replacing them by AI tools. And the actual evidence, I haven't put it here, what I've read of the evidence about this is that there is no significant increase in productivity overall for a lot of the applications that companies are making, including replacing people. Now, shadow AI is slightly different. That's another nice term for you. Shadow AI is when people in the company doing their jobs entrust company data without proper supervision to a generic, open, and sometimes free AI tool. And I'm sure GPT starts the race, but there are plenty of others where you can get free services. And it's, the shadow bit just means they're doing something a bit naughty in terms of their employment. But the article makes the point that it can happen that the data, the company data, becomes part of the training base of the AI system. And there are ways in which bits of the training data can leak out into chatbot responses. And that's number 6. Number 7, I suspect most of you have heard of because it's had such a lot of press. Occasions, in this case, it's based in South Africa, but it certainly happened in the US, where at cases in law, one of the parties produces a brief that cites cases, chapter and verse, court and location, which are wholly fictional. So that's a case where you get what are, as it were, formally in shape what you should be producing, but in this case has no truth in it whatever. And that's something like what they're calling hallucinations. I would rather call it confabulation. I think that's the nearest psychological term to what's going on, except only humans can confabulate, just as, of course, hallucinations are in people's minds and they're not in print in a court document. And a quite separate and in a way much more widely worrying aspect of AI now is the way in which hundreds of thousands or millions of people getting into conversation with these chatbots have some kind of fixation on them, and that can happen in more than one way. An aspect of this is that one step back, when you're talking to an AI chatbot, and I'm talking now about the generic ones. This isn't a purpose-built one for a particular profession. You're talking to a front end, which is presenting. It's the doorkeeper, as it were, to the actual serious programming and computation that's going on in the background. And very commonly, at least until you tell them not to, they're going to schmooze you or stroke you. I get this from some of them. They say, "That's a wonderful question, Harry. That's very insightful." They're programmed to make you feel good, and also programmed to make the person feel that the opinions they express are correct, however outrageous they may be. And there's one of the cases, I'm not sure it's documented here, was an American chap who was in love with an AI girlfriend that's created by Meta. And she undertook to meet him in Chicago. I think it must have been in suburban New York, I think. And this poor chap wasn't safe on the road at all, and he walked out and got run over. He was on his way to Chicago, but he never got more than half a mile. The other kind of thing, which was in a quite recent 7 a.m. podcast, for those that follow 7 a.m., where there are cases of estranged spouses who talk to AI confidence and whose views are reinforced, and so they abuse their ex-spouse much worse because they're getting the support of the AI confident. So that's a whole very serious area in the field of AI. So as I've said, I think I'll go back over them in turn, and then, depending what anyone wants to say or ask, try and preserve, it's now 10 to 5 minutes anyway, so I'll be very quick with this one, for anything else anybody wants to ask about. So anyone in the room want to, I better get the screen back, hadn't I? Can I do that? I must do that. Okay. Thinks, yes, I can see my screen, even if you can't. So I've got to stop the sharing.
We can see your screen.
Yeah, I know. I've got to get back to the right place. Just a moment. Got to get back to there. If I remember this problem last time, I've got to find the right place on my screen. There we go. Let's try that. That's better. Right. Have you got me now?
We're still looking at your screen.
Okay, I'll stop. I'm being offered to share. That's crazy.
Press escape, Harry. See if you get a red prompt somewhere on the screen.
I thought last time I'm being offered a share. I'm not being offered something that allows me to stop sharing.
You can share more than once, so
Got to find the right share, have I? Am I still sharing?
Yep.
Harry, you're on maximum screen, a minimized screen thing. Go on to maximum screen, and it might bring in bits that are hanging off your display. Top right corner, next to the X. Go for maximum screen.
I actually already was.
It's showing you maximum is available. That means you're in a reduced size.
I am now on maximum.
I think that's on our screens, John.
I'm not talking about the two arrows that Zoom put on.
Yeah, that's on our end.
That might make a difference.
A minute.
Click around on each of the Zoom windows and press escape.
I've got, I always see what I mean, yes, okay. Go there, that's the problem. I've only got one desktop, wait a minute, there we go. That's my Zoom meeting. A minute.
What happens if you hit the X at the top right-hand corner of the screen?
Leave meeting.
That's it.
That's a still picture. Still there? Are you still there, Harry? Harry, I think we've lost you altogether.
I think you're right, Barry.
Well, just while Harry's sorting that out, for those in the room, a number of us will go to Fong's Chinese restaurant for what's called a waffle sig. They have fine wine and fine foods. So there'll be at least half a dozen of us here who will be going. And they're in Centre Road down towards Oakley. But if you're interested and you don't know where to go, ask John or Kirsten or Stuart or somebody, even me.
Okay, well, by leaving the meeting, I seem to have solved the problem. I've had that one before and I thought I'd found the place, but obviously not.
Welcome back, Harry.
Thank you. So any comments or questions?
Harry, did you say before you were going to put that exhibit on?
I put a
PC
link
update?
I put a link in chat before I spoke.
What about PC update?
Oh, I haven't said anything about that, no.
Would that be a good idea?
I don't know. I might speak to the editor. We're on good terms. Did you all get the link? Because I'm not seeing the old comments here now.
The link that you put up, Harry,
Yes.
didn't lead to the book, but it is there.
Oh no, the link is not to the book.
All right, okay.
I just gave you that.
Thanks.
So of course I'm not going to share the screen, am I? But I didn't give you a link to Tim Berners-Lee's book.
No, but Karen, I just put the book name up there and you just Google it.
I mean, the book is called This Is For Everyone.
Yep, correct.
If the link was on the chat, but that information might also perhaps go in PC update, then we can catch up.
No, the link I put on the chat was the link to the entire document.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So well, if you got that, you got everything. I'll put it up again if you like.
Well, you put a lot of work into that document. Be a pity to waste it.
I've lost sight of the old notes, I think, because I'm a new arrival here. Well, anyway, yes and no, because I do follow on with such time as is available reporting on different internet places about all this, because it's a huge topic, and it's not a simple or single topic at all. There are endless dimensions to it. But I guess most people in this room are fortunate in that they're not in employment where they're being required to use AI in some way, with or without proper supervision. But an awful lot there are statistics. I think the people using it most in their employment tend to be in the younger sectors, but there are also employers, in the global north who are insisting on people using it. In fact, look, I think it's in today's age, actually, isn't it? Somebody writing in saying, my employer asked me to use AI, and then when I submitted a report which I'd used AI, and I got told off for using AI. So I think one of the really big problems is that it's the flavor of the month to be using AI, whatever you know or don't know about what that means. And in particular, the remotest understanding of what's really going on is not disseminated equally at the different ranks of organizations. I mean, it seems pretty clear that Sam Altman, who is probably the most influential CEO because he's the CEO of OpenAI, can't possibly have any real idea about his creature, ChatGPT. It is very well documented now that in terms of AI activity, all these companies throwing their billions away are not getting remotely a return on that investment comparable to the actual numbers. Of course, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have got huge income sources apart from what they're throwing at AI. So you can't necessarily, it's not always easy to find out, but OpenAI at the moment is still a private company. Part of it's just being readied to become a for-profit company and presumably quoted on the stock exchange. But Sam Altman was asked in an interview how he would deal with the problem that he was spending so very much more than he was getting an income. Oh, he said, when AGI is here, I'll ask ChatGPT. AGI, of course, being artificial general intelligence, which apparently these people believe in. That isn't rational. It's a bit like everybody spending $10 million on their horses in the Melbourne Cup, knowing that out of the 10 people, 9 of them would have wasted their money if all the money went to the winner. The commentators say, and you can make of this what you will, because I'm just quoting, that AGI is the holy grail here. They think it will emerge in some way from these activities.
Harry,
it's 9 o'clock, I'm sorry.
It's 9 o'clock, Harry, but you've given us some important insights there, and thank you for that. I think AI is at the sort of stage that the railways were when Stephenson invented his rocket, and that scared the daylights out of people at that time. But look what it led to, and AI perhaps is, something at its infancy in the same way. But
if it were a single thing, I think we could probably spend several hours debating these analogies which are produced. And it's, of course, it's easy to be wise in retrospect about things, because for every railway, there were 10 different, for every steam engine, as it were, there were 10 different inventions that went absolutely nowhere.
Exactly.
And we're not dealing with a single product at all. But look, here's one example of the kind of lunacy involved in the expenditure. A major target for expenditure, or a major way they're spending the money, is on new data centers. But these are not data centers in the old sense. These centers are full of NVIDIA chips dedicated to AI, which will be obsolete in 2 years. And they spend a few $1 billion on one of these centers. And the next generation of chips is going to make that one obsolete. And I'm not inventing that. That's what the commentators are saying.
NVIDIA is now the richest company in the world.
They make the shovels. The picks and shovels.
Their turnover is more than that of Australia. Okay, Harry, thank you very much. We'll give
I'll
you.
hang around a bit if anybody else wants to stay around, of course. But thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you, and we are giving you a hand in here.
Thank
I don't know whether people online are giving you a clap or not.
Oh, I don't. I've got the wrong view at the moment. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, it's 9 o'clock, so we're going to declare our meeting closed. If Harry and others want to stay online and chat informally, you're more than welcome to do so. But we're stopping the recording at this stage.